So you already decided to take your shrouds off your memory because it's so damn hot you want to run a fan on it. A couple little things you can do to make that fan less ugly if you really care about the aesthetics of your PC case. And the memory. Like the LED lights on it when you take off the shroud, they can tend to become very bright. Again, I do this kind of stuff. You do it at your own risk, but it's worked for me so far. So we'll see what happens. But here's one little thing I did. This fan. I cut these edges off, and I might probably cut actually these ones off too, because I thought I might need these edges to wedge them behind the other side of everything and behind the GPU. But I don't really need them. But once you put this in here, the fan becomes almost unnoticeable. Like these big corners really stick out like ugly. So you can still stick it. As long as you keep the cowling in place, you'll get in the same airflow. These are just for mounting. But you can cut all these off. You know, paint the edges or whatever. And it's almost unnoticeable once it's in the case. It's pretty neat. So another thing I did, see my memory, the RAM? Yeah, this is a crazy one. I thought there was a good chance I could have broken my RAM doing this. But I had this tube. Since I took off my cowlings, the LEDs were just really bright and it threw off the aesthetic of the case. I didn't like it. It didn't match. It really stood out. So I had these tubes. These were for, you stick them inside of your hardline acrylic tubes and you heat it with the heat gun and you bend it and you put those tubes inside so that the bends don't fold over themselves, so that it keeps the interior, the internal diameter intact. So yeah, it was so bright. So I was like, you know what? These tubes, they look, I noticed this, they look a lot like these strips. They're, you know, they're semi-transparent. You can see through them if you put, you know, light through them. And I was like, those tubes look a lot like the strips that were on the outside of my G-Skill cowlings. So I said, let's see what happens. So I cut these tubes out and I cut a line straight down with a razor. I mean, as deep as it could go, till the razor was just almost poking through the other end. Now, you got to go all the way deep if you want it to come out good. And then I took an epoxy and I put it inside. It's not easy. You don't want to get it all over your memory, so be careful. And I put the epoxy inside of the strip, and then I just flopped it around the RAM. so now I've got this, and it matches my case. And it diffused really well too. It actually like increased the amount of lighting because the area that the light is being like diffused into got bigger than it was being diffused through this tiny strip. So it actually like increased the RGB amount, I guess. But just some funny little things you pick up along the way. Have a good one. Oh, one more thing. Make sure you do not get the epoxy on the pins. You know, where it's got all the little pins on the back end where you slide it into the motherboard. Not get the epoxy on the pins, because if you put it in there, and you won't notice it really because it's clear. You gotta run your finger across it, you know, meticulously. Make sure there's no epoxy on there. Because if you plug it into the motherboard and there's any epoxy on those pins, it's not gonna post. It's gonna error. And I just had that happen to me actually when I did it. And I was like, oh God, what did I do? Did I break it? Is this conductive? Did I fry my mother? You know, I was freaking out. But what I did actually was I took a razor and I very carefully set it on the pins, like as if the memory was running this way on the ground. And I set it on the pins and I just went like this. And I just scraped it down and then I went sideways across the pins, gently. I cannot stress that enough, gently. And I did that a few times and scraped it a little bit on both sides, put it back in, and it posted. So there was definitely a little bit of epoxy on like one of my pins that just so happened to get out. So if you have an issue, and nobody's gonna try this, nobody, but you know, I'm crazy, so whatever.